Welcome. You are listening to and perhaps even watching the Financial Survival Network. And I'm Kerry Lutz. And well, today is June 26th, 2020. And and hey, I had the good fortune of reading an article that you really need to read. It's in AmericanThinker.com. We'll post the link here on the site, and you can check it out. It's an article by our good friend, Dr. Ted Noel, and talking about the great American mask hoax. Right now in Florida, we've had an upsurge in coronavirus, COVID-19, not in deaths, mind you, but in new cases. And that has led our public officials to do something, do anything, and their solution is wearing masks when in public, in buildings, in businesses, something I greatly resent. And well, Dr. Ted, it's great to have you back on.
It's good to be with you.
Okay, so this article needed to be written because I saw a study that said the best protection you can get next to a properly fitted N95 mask is wearing a vacuum cleaner bag over your head. And none of my vacuums use bags anymore. They're all like, the dirt goes into a bin, a hopper, and you dump it out. So I don't even know where to get a vacuum cleaner bag. But what is the deal with these masks? Are we being fed basically a spoonful of you know what?
Well, if you read all of the literature, and I went under this project by request. I wasn't going to bother with it. But you read all of the studies that are out there, and you can go to PubMed and look at it. You don't have to be a doctor to read it. Basically, everybody who studies it shows masks aren't really of any benefit. And even if you look at the CDC recommendations, they use the word may. If they had any data, they would say data shows that it will reduce. And the answer is, I'm sorry, it doesn't work. I mean, get this. If you look at families where kids get sick with a flu-like illness and the parents wear masks, there's a lovely study that looked at 3 groups with this. And basically the idea was, we're going to have mommy and daddy wear masks. Well, kids hate that because mommy and daddy are hiding. But if you can get them to wear the masks all the way through the kid's illness, it turns out that the parents who wear the masks maybe have a smaller number of getting sick themselves. But when you do the statistics, and it was a beautifully designed study with hundreds of patients, there is no statistical significance to it. They don't help. And here you're looking at a circumstance where you should be able to say, if the masks helped, we know these others would get better, and they don't work. I mean, we go pick every other circumstance they've been tested. The masks don't help. I spent 36 years in the operating room as an anesthesiologist through training and through private practice. We always wore masks. And the idea was that if you wore a mask, whatever the bugs are in your mouth won't get into the wound to infect the patient. Well, there were some studies that came out of England just as I was retiring 8 years ago that started to say, we're not so sure about this. And if you look at the operating rooms where the anesthesia staff is a few feet away from the actual operating field and they have their tea and crackers during the case, their infection rate isn't any different than the ones who wear masks and don't bring anything into the operating room.
Really?
So we're going, okay, what's going on? And it turns out a lovely study looking at staff wearing masks, not wearing masks. The staff where they wore the masks actually had a slightly higher, not statistically significant, but a slightly higher infection rate. That is, wounds getting infected. And you're going, either the masks aren't happening and we're seeing part of the variation in the way statistics go, because you know everything's on a curve and we might be a little off to that one side of the curve or that side of the curve. Either we're seeing statistical variation or the masks just flat don't work, because there's nothing that makes sense that says masks are going to make you sicker, you know, on that.
Yeah. So what they're saying is if you're well and you don't have it, it's probably not going to do any good. But if you're sick and asymptomatic, then it'll stop you from spreading it to others. Is that flawed logic?
The problem is that there's no data, and all of the data stands against it. We know that unless you're wearing an N95, most of the spread is going to come from around the edges of the mask. Okay, every time you breathe out, every time you talk, you have an aerosol that comes out. Okay, you have water vapor comes out and it carries with it virus. And with an N95, where you're breathing through the mask, it'll be trapped, which is why every few hours you need to change your N95 mask, because now you've contaminated the mask. But let's look at all of the others. It comes out of your mouth, around the edges. And in that case, what you've got is spread into the room anyway. And the CDC admits that almost all spread of the virus to reinfect a secondary person comes from prolonged close quarters exposure. And by prolonged, they say longer than 10 minutes. That's not saying hi to somebody in the aisle at Costco.
Yeah, I usually try to ignore those people.
Well, so I'm a friendly guy. I chat with people, but I don't spend 10 minutes with them. Of course, Costco's got those 45-foot ceilings. So let's go to my local grocery store, which only has 25-foot ceilings. Oh, wait a minute. My aerosols get spread out to in a big area. The places that get infected are close quarters. The first study of that came out of Guangzhou, China, and you had a restaurant where you had one table sitting here, table here, and a table on that side. One of the people on the middle table was sick. Well, people around him got sick. The air conditioner went down from this side, across this table, to his table, to that table, and back up through the return, and you had this loop running. And so the people downwind of him got sick. They were there for 90 minutes. That's prolonged exposure.
Yeah.
And because it went back through the air conditioner down here, the people in this table got sick too. And that's what happens. You had prolonged exposure in close quarters. Then another study looked at a call center where an entire floor of the call center had a large number of people got infected from somebody who was sick. Bottom line is, don't go to work if you're sick. If you are infected but not symptomatic, you're not shedding a whole lot of virus. And there's no way to know. Ultimately, you look at, what is a reasonable risk? We have to remember that everybody who breathed air died.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean air is toxic.
Yeah.
But the fact is, none of us get out alive. And what are the risks that are reasonable to undertake? And if you're not sick, your chance of spreading it to others is pretty darn small. And in the call center case, they had like 60% of the people got sick in that one floor. And that was where you had air conditioning. Air handler picked up the air from that floor, ran it through the chiller back down into that floor. So the air handler recirculated it, and you had people who spend 8+ hours in a closed environment. Those are the places that people get sick in.
Yeah. So the other thing these studies have shown is that there's virtually no outdoor transmission taking place.
Absolutely. I've written about this several times. All of the restrictions on the golf courses, one person in a cart, don't touch a flag stick, no rakes in the bunkers, are complete garbage. And the PGA Tour, obviously, they have to listen to the CDC or they're going to get reamed when one person gets sick. PGA Tour ought to let everybody in, because sunlight, whether it comes through clouds or not, has ultraviolet, which sterilizes very quickly.
Same with ball games, football games, baseball games. You're out there in the open, and it's getting sterilized. And the Chinese researched 7,000 cases, and they found two possible outdoor transmissions, but they couldn't be
Mhm.
sure of it. And those are pretty good odds. You know, I look at, I'm in Florida on the East Coast. We have this highway that I call the Highway of Death, I-95. And I watch bodies getting pulled off that highway on a regular basis, like multiple times per week. And I say to people, what do you think is more dangerous? Going to a restaurant or whatever, or driving down I 95? And anybody with any common sense says I 95.
Oh, absolutely. I-95 though is a piker compared to I-4.
Yeah, I know, and I 10, but it's still pretty bad.
Yeah.
Florida drivers, but I think Florida drivers are the COVID-19 of drivers across the country here. You know, they're like gonna, and it's definitely, you know, there was one study recently, doctor, I want to get your feedback on. Um, Farr's law. Farr's law says, and this is a guy who observed smallpox epidemics in 1840. So he didn't know how they were being transmitted because they didn't know about germs before the sterile method, all these things. And he observed that the epidemics lasted, and they were a bell curve, and that the most vulnerable people died early, as one writer referred to it, the low-hanging fruit, and that later on there was more infections, but the death rate went down until it ended, and that's kind of what we're seeing here. Farr's
Uh,
law, a guy from
mhm.
1840 figured this out, but the CDC can't figure this out, doctor.
Well, Nobel Prize winner Michael Levitt from Stanford
Yes.
duplicated that. He didn't make reference to Farr's law, but the fact is that we saw this huge spike in cases and deaths, and then all of a sudden it went right down the other way. And it is the low-hanging fruit. And part of this has to do with, where does it go? What are the closed spaces with the high-risk individuals? Nursing homes, vertically oriented housing in New York that has very poor maintenance,
Jails.
that sort of thing. Jails. Okay. In New York, Governor Cuomo sent COVID patients to nursing homes. In Florida, Governor DeSantis said, no way, no how, kept the sick people out of the nursing homes. And Florida has a mortality rate 1/10 of New York.
Yeah, this was sheer and utter madness. I likened it to negligent homicide. I think these people should be tried. Governor
Agreed.
Murphy did it in New Jersey. Governor Wolf did it in Pennsylvania. Governor Whitmer did it in Michigan. The governor of California tried to do it. There was an uproar, and it stopped. He only did it for 2 days. So when you look at it, you didn't have to be an epidemiologist to know that you were going to kill off a lot of people by doing this if they given it any thought. And their excuse was triage. We got all these patients, they're going to load up the hospitals, and we're going to have a breakdown. But in the meantime, all of the field hospitals that were set up, and the naval ship, the Comfort, all had thousands of beds, and the hospitals in upstate New York that they made shut down because they could only take COVID patients were empty. So they could have helicoptered, they could have statted them up there and put thousands of patients in upstate hospitals. Instead, they chose to send them to nursing homes. And we're going to be hearing about this for a long time. For the first time, I actually heard somebody in government say, this is manslaughter. In New York, we'd call it negligent homicide. In other places, they call it involuntary manslaughter. But somebody's got to be called to account for this. So looking ahead,
I think there'll be damage suits on this, and this is a perfect test case for qualified immunity.
yeah, definitely. And New York State passed a bill that gave the nursing home operators immunity from lawsuits for this very issue. And that just shows premeditation, in my opinion. But we'll let the judicial system hopefully work its magic there. Looking ahead, what are we going to see here, and when is this thing going to be over? I thought it would be over by now, but
we're going to see a lot more younger people getting infected. And I want to separate out infection and illness, because infection simply means you got the bug, it stirred up an immune response, and your body shut down the bug without harming you on your ability to do daily life. Ill means the bug had sufficient overwhelming power to impair your daily life. If we look at the data, and I had California data handy, back of the envelope calculations show that the group that's getting sick now, which is the 18 to 35 cohort, if you look at people 35 and under, and you compare their risk of mortality, the risk of dying from this disease, with the people 80 and over, it turns out that the people who are at risk of dying, the old people are 286 times more likely to die from the bug than people under age 35. Let's do that number again, 286 times. Basically what it says is if you're under age 35, your risk of dying from this bug is less than your risk of dying in a knife fight after you got drunk at the bar.
Yeah, it's absurd. And so we're seeing the younger people get infected. We're seeing the death rate has been down since mid-April, where it peaked, and primarily in New York State. And we're seeing the number of deaths in Florida somewhere at 40 or so per day, 40 to 60. And what we really don't even know is how many of these people are really dying from COVID. I saw an alarming statistic that when somebody checks into a nursing home, on average, they've got 5 months left to live. So we really have no idea how many people have just died from COVID. There's been a lot of analyses, but no definitive study on the number.
I wrote about
COVID
this
deaths
early on when the Italian data came out. The average age of COVID death in Italy was 82. The average life expectancy total in Italy was 82.7. Mm-hmm. In other words, all that happened was you changed the date on the death certificate. And one of my comments, following on where you are, has been that anything remotely related to COVID, if their symptoms sounded like it, even if you didn't confirm it, they became a COVID death. So our total of 120,000 deaths from COVID is probably double the actual number. One time I wrote down, I said that if your ex-wife's second cousin died with COVID or had COVID while you died in the hospital, you're listed as a COVID death.
Yeah, and George Floyd, he could have been written down as a COVID death too.
Absolutely.
He was infected. So really these numbers are kind of ridiculous and just used to panic the public. So if I could summarize, what you're saying is, at this point, you're probably, if you get infected, it's probably not going to kill you unless you have comorbidities and you're elderly. And in all likelihood, you're going to recover and you'll have immunity. And basically, so I've always said the number of cases makes absolutely no difference because only a fraction of them are being diagnosed. The only numbers that matter are hospitalizations and deaths. Right?
And even the hospitalizations don't necessarily matter that much, because it used to be a hospitalization was going to chew up a bid for 7 days. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick of Texas was on Breitbart News this morning talking about this. And his point was, we've taken 7-day hospitalizations in that low-hanging fruit, high mortality group, and now we're seeing them at 3 days.
Wow, I didn't know that. Yeah.
And the key is, because The news people are talking cases instead of hospitalizations, lengths of stay, and mortality, all of which are crucial and important in this. They're painting this horrible picture when, in fact, there's no reason. Texas just backtracked on their opening. They should, in fact, carry forward. Florida, Ron DeSantis has made a point. We will look at the data. We'll hold, we're not going to be instantly reactive, although he did threaten bars with losing a liquor license. And give me a break. 40 proof liquor will reduce the transmission of virus because the mouthwash will do it. And the people who are getting drunk in the bars are the ones that we really would rather have getting drunk, getting sick.
Yeah, well, I also saw that if you're a smoker, nicotine, you have 23% less chance of getting COVID. So it's encouraging all these bad behaviors. Hey, why not just mandate that everybody hop in a sauna 3 times a day? Because the sauna is going to kill off the virus too. I mean, there's a limit to this do-goodism, this feel-goodism. Like
everything is emotional now.
Yeah.
I mean, we can go all the way from Antifa Stan in Seattle to pulling down statues in DC to COVID. Everything is emotional, and it all falls back to the news mantra that if it bleeds, it leads. Yes. And if nothing's bleeding, let's find something that we can make bleed.
Yeah. And
we're going to tug, oh my God, this is horrible.
Yeah. So what's worse? Oh, we had 600 COVID related deaths because you don't really know if they happen from COVID or not, or we had 38,000 new cases. Which one is better? And which one's going to get more clicks? Because they don't even sell the dead tree media is dead. It's all about clickbait. So this story is just one giant example of clickbait. Hey, Dr. Ted, we got to get going now. Just tell us, we know about your YouTube channel, but you're writing for a number of websites now. Just clue us in.
I write for 3 websites, American Thinker, Town Hall, and NOQ Report. You'll find me every 2 or 3 days on one of them.
All right. Yeah, it's hard to keep track of you now. Let me just relate a funny story.
On Twitter, I'll get your story in a second. On Twitter, just follow me at Dr. Ted, and you'll see all of those other links when they come up.
Yeah, well, all the conservatives are deserting Twitter now. They're going to Parler. I might just do it. They've had me sandbox there, YouTube for years. So I'm reading this article, and I didn't notice who wrote it. And, I'm reading the article about COVID, and I'm getting to the end, and I said, I know Dr. Ted wrote this article, and I look up, and sure enough, Ted Noel, MD. I knew your writing style. I knew your arguments, the logic behind them, the persuasiveness, and there it was. So if any of you out there have a question for Dr. Ted, I'll pass it on to him. Email me, kl@kerrylutz.com. That's kl@kerrylutz.com. The website where you can get a free newsletter, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. And of course, our Twitter feed, we will soon have a Parler feed, is @KerryLutz. And Dr. Ted, I want to thank you again for taking time out from your day, sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with us. It's really a great help.
Well, you're most welcome, and you kept me from cooking out on the golf course today.
Well, then I've really done a service.
Yes, it's 97 degrees.
Yeah, it's only 93 here. That's the difference between the East Coast and the West Coast. So anyway, guys, just email me, kl@kerrylutz.com. Dr. Ted, we'll talk to you again real soon, I have a feeling.
Well, I'll be here. I appreciate you calling on me.
Hi everyone, just a very quick video which could be a real game changer of the whole coronavirus thing. Obviously there's a huge shortage of masks around the world at the moment, but my friend just showed me this and it is a great idea. You're going to think I'm stupid, but trust me, if you haven't got these in your house, maybe you don't have young kids, you can go and buy them and they're dead cheap. Take me seriously, nappies. They've got various layers in them. They have Velcro on the back. You can wrap them around your face, they'll cover your mouth and your nose as well. And to be honest with you, the bigger the better. You can cover around there and absolutely spot on. You can breathe just about, you can talk, and this could be a real game changer in the fight against coronavirus. So just take this seriously, get out there, cover that face, cover the nose, and stay safe, everybody.